The pollen from the pine tree is a very rare and special medicine. Not rare in the sense that it's hard to find, because pines grow absolutely everywhere and you probably have pine trees growing close to where you are right now. But the pollen is rare in the sense that it's such a nutritious, regenerative, energizing, detoxifying, hormone-balancing, anti-inflammatory, adaptogenic substance. And medicines that promote health in this many ways are not common throughout the plant kingdom. There are many different species of pine, and all parts of the tree possess different healing attributes, but the pollen is the reproductive essence of the tree, and so it's the most concentrated form of medicine that it produces. Every springtime, the catkins, or the flowers of the pine tree, produce an overabundance of pollen. Firstly, to fertilize the pine cones, but also to help fertilize, nourish, and support the biodiversity of all species of plants and animal within the forest ecosystem. All species of pine produce pollen that's very similar in terms of its medicinal benefits, but what exactly are those benefits? Well, firstly, we should look at its nutrient profile, because seldom do we find a safe, natural food that contains such a broad spectrum of essential nutrients. Pine pollen is a complete source of protein with all 8 essential amino acids. It contains omega-3 fats, vitamin D2 and D3, which is exceptionally rare for a plant, as well as other fat-soluble nutrients like A and E, plus B complex including B1, B2, B3, B6 and B9. It contains a large selection of important trace minerals, immune-enhancing polysaccharides, methyl sulfonyl methane, which is MSM, DNA-building nucleic acids, and a mass of antioxidants. It actually stimulates the production of our body's own endogenous master antioxidants, glutathione and superoxide dismutase. So pine pollen is one of the most nutrient-dense wild foods that exists, and it's safe for everybody to consume, men, women, and children alike. And unlike many other types of pollen, allergies to pine pollen are comparatively rare. I mean, that's not to say that it doesn't happen, but in the majority of cases, even people that do have seasonal allergies tend to be fine with pine pollen. Beyond its role as a nutritive substance, pine pollen has become quite well known because it contains phytoandrogens. Phyto meaning plant, and androgen meaning male steroid hormone or male sex hormone. So pine pollen contains these steroid-like compounds that are actually bioidentical to male reproductive hormones such as testosterone and androstenedione. It also contains hormonal precursors like DHEA. Now, these substances are not so readily available in pine pollen in its whole form, which is why it's often extracted into a pure quality, high-strength alcohol, which makes these hormone-producing sterols bioavailable and absorbable to the human body. So while the pollen powder is a nourishing food-like medicine for people of all ages, the alcohol-based extract has a much stronger influence on the endocrine system, especially suited to people advancing towards and beyond middle age, whose active levels of these reproductive hormones can begin to decrease quite rapidly, which is related to the onset of many degenerative conditions associated with aging, like weight management issues, low energy levels, depression, osteoporosis and arthritis, and even certain types of cancer associated with the reproductive organs. While this shift in hormones is very common throughout menopause and the male equivalent andropause, we can still soften the turbulence of uncomfortable symptoms and address the hormonal deficiency by supplementing with a natural source of bioidentical hormones such as pine pollen. But natural aging aside, we do need to consider other factors that can cause an imbalance in these reproductive hormones in people of any age, such as the prevalence of hormone-mimicking substances that are sadly now an integral part of human culture and of the natural world all around us. Plastic convenience products and packaging were created in the early 1900s, and they've now become so widespread that over 300 million tons of plastic products are produced globally every year, and only about 10% of that is actually recycled. So the rest of it just goes into landfill or it ends up in the ocean, which means that it's going to break down into microparticles and it's going to be consumed by tiny organisms that are going to be consumed by bigger and bigger organisms all the way up through the food chain to the top predators of the ecosystem. And this is a huge problem for a lot of reasons, not least because plastic contains what are called xenoestrogens, which are estrogen-mimicking chemicals that enter the bodies of living organisms, and they behave like female reproductive hormones, which causes many imbalances and diseases. In the ocean, for example, the widespread presence of plastic is disrupting the equilibrium of marine ecosystems, and if we eat these animals, it transfers the burden of toxicity to our own bodies, leading to endocrine disruption and estrogen dominance, which can cause behavioral abnormalities, tumors of the reproductive organs, and a lot of other serious health problems. This also applies to the food and drink that's contained within soft plastic packaging. Water, for example, just like in the ocean, is an excellent solvent, and when it's contained within a plastic bottle, xenoestrogens like BPA will leach into the water, and then of course we will drink it. Petrochemicals that form the basis of most industrial fertilizers and pesticides also carry estrogen-mimicking compounds that are predominantly used throughout global agriculture. So this means that all non-organic plant foods are being grown with these chemical additives, causing them to disrupt hormone balance when we consume them regularly. Many pharmaceuticals and cosmetics are also based on petrochemical ingredients, and prolonged use can sometimes contribute to similar hormonal imbalances. Then, of course, we have the industry of nuclear power and the weapons industry, the waste and fallout of which is not reported anywhere near as transparently as it should be, but nevertheless it creates a global distribution of radioactive isotopes that likewise contribute towards hormonal irregularities, especially concerning these reproductive hormones that we're talking about. Without including the pollution from accidents involving nuclear power stations, military weapons testing alone detonated over 2,000 nuclear bombs throughout the last 50 years of the 20th century, and that still doesn't account for the last couple of decades. But when we consider the half-life of radioactive isotopes, some of which last many decades, the presence, influence, and toxicity of natural ecosystems is significant, to say the least. So there's been an ongoing chronic assault on the hormonal behavior of life on this planet, plants and animals alike, for quite a while now. And it's manifesting in some of the major diseases of civilization that we now face as a species. It's encouraging to know, however, that despite our culturally short-sighted decisions and all of the systemic pollution that we're causing to all natural ecosystems, nature is still one step ahead, and it offers a number of solutions to this human-centric destruction that we're responsible for. And pine pollen is one such solution. It's a natural strategy that can help to offset the health consequences from decades of plutocracy and material gain at the expense of natural rhythms and cycles. So pine pollen can help to fill the nutrient gaps left from food raised and grown in nutrient-deficient soil, and the extract can support a healthy endocrine and reproductive function. And the fact that it stimulates the body's own production of our master antioxidants, glutathione and superoxide dismutase, means that it can inhibit the mutation of our DNA and help to reverse the genetic damage caused from the constant exposure we have to electromagnetic radiation, Wi-Fi, and the radioactive isotopes that have begun to accumulate in the surrounding environment. This isn't scaremongering or conspiracy theory. This is the world that we're living in right now, and this is why we must try to adapt and to employ safe natural measures to safeguard ourselves in a low-impact and sustainable way. Pine pollen makes the perfect addition to a modern health strategy because it offers so many antidotes to the toxicity of modern life, but also because it's just so abundant. On average, an adult pine tree will produce between 2 and 3 kilos of pollen in a single season, which means that a large, healthy pine forest can easily produce hundreds of tons of pollen in just a few weeks. Pine pollen stimulates the regeneration of the liver, and it helps to regulate bile secretion, and its polysaccharide content can directly enhance the activity of immune cells like macrophages and natural killer cells. Polysaccharides like arabinogalactan, which constitutes at least 1% of each pollen grain, is very effective at bolstering immune function while also protecting the mucosal lining of the small intestine and the colon. It even possesses some anti-tumor compounds, like groups of sterols called brasinosteroids and another group called gibberellins, both of which are known to inhibit the growth of certain types of breast and prostate cancer. So as we've already discussed, many of the sterols in pine pollen are very similar to our own growth hormones, and they can support the growth of healthy tissue. Yet, sterols like gibberellins can also reduce inflammation and promote faster and more complete healing and recovery, which makes pine pollen an excellent natural supplement for people who are very active, or working out a lot, or just recovering from injury. So pines have been playing a fundamental role within the forest ecosystems of this planet for over 150 million years, and it's at this time of modern global crisis that we begin to find answers and solutions provided not by government or corporations, but by the elders of this planet, almost timeless organisms that have been observing life on this planet longer than we can comprehend. It's really the hubris of our own species that's the reason that we're facing such catastrophic global destruction, and really why our own inner nature, both physically and mentally, is declining and degenerating so rapidly. But when we turn towards nature with respect and humility, we can begin to realize that the remedies to so many of the mistakes that we've made, and really to the fundamental ignorance of our species, so many of the antidotes to these things have been living and growing all around us far longer than we've actually been here.